let's get started with the next topic, which is the last core principle, the last core pillar into the core Workday HCM is your business process. Okay, so now business process by the name itself gives us a lot of information. Business process is a process which helps you achieve a business objective. That is what a true business process is. Now, there are different versions of business process. I won't say versions of it, but different ways you can work with business process. And it's very, very important for any Workday HCM consultant to know what a business process is, how it works. You should be able to create one yourself. And if needed, you should have the ability to troubleshoot as and when the requirement comes up. Okay, so a very common examples like hire, termination, change job, transfers, compensation changes, one-time payments, requesting time off, requesting leave of absence, change benefit, benefit enrollment. So all these are nothing but business processes. In the previous topics of security, we talked about business processes, security side of it. Now we'll actually work on business process and we'll continue to refer back how the security is also associated with it. But in today's session, we'll go over the different, I'd say the different types of business process, which are again very, very important to know. And you should know when to create them and when not to create it. So I have in front of you three different boxes. One says default definition, the other one says object-based, and then the last one is rule-based. So these are the three different versions. Again, I'm saying versions, I'm sorry. These are the three different types of business process you can work with, and each of them has a specific use case. And so let's talk about this one, the default definition. So any business process that is Workday delivered will come with a default definition suffix, something like this. So all these Workday delivered processes will always have a default definition as a suffix. You can see there everyone has a default definition. Now, whenever you see a default definition, the first thing that you should know is that it is Workday delivered, that this came in as out-of-the-box configuration when your company started Workday. Right? But this does not mean that this looks the same as it was when the company started with Workday implementation. So this might have been modified because if you have the right security, you can edit the business processes, even the default definition. So most of the time, majority of the business process that we use in the system, we use them, the ones that are Workday delivered, and we modify them as per our own requirements. And to be able to modify them, you need access to business process administrator security group. It is a user-based security group, which means it's unconstrained access. If you have access to this security group, then you have the ability to work with any area of business process. And the next one is object-based. Now, object-based only works with object, and that object is nothing but your supervisory organization, right? And the best practice that we normally follow is copy from a default definition and add another point specific to super. Now this second type of business process, the way we created, let's say we have a use case of hire. I'll select this hire process. So how to create a custom version, we'll learn that first in this session. And in the following sessions, we learn deep dive into all these other elements of the business process. Okay. So you go to the related action from a default definition process. You go to the business process and use the second option, copy or link business process definition. You can see there are two options, copy workflow definition to business object or the rule-based. And these are the two types that we learned today. So let's start with the first one, which is using the business object. Now, business object, basically it is asking you for supervisory organization. In business object type, it only allows for supervisory organization. No other type of organization, whether it be company, cost center, or location hierarchy, does not allow. Excuse me. It only allows for supervisory organizations. I will go with. Okay, we don't have Velvet. Velvet organizations is what we were working with, right? So I'll use an existing setup of a global modern services then. So let's say I go with global modern tech. Now this supervisor, as you can see here, this is of type supervisory. It does not allow any other type. You can try your own organizations. It won't list out in this dropdown. And adding this here means I'll be creating a new definition. New definition means different steps and what the purpose of that business process would be. It becomes different and it will apply to all these subordinates as well. So now I click OK. And that brings you to the edit mode, and you can make changes to the existing process by adding or removing the steps. Now you can see here, this will tell you that this particular version is of a business object version. It's not a default definition. And what I'll do is I'll remove some steps here. I'm not worried about how the business process looks right now and what it is doing. I'm more concerned about learning the different ways I can create business process. So this is how an object process looks like. You can see by the name itself, it gives the hire for Global Modern Tech Inc. This is your business object, which is nothing but your supervisory organization. Now, the only reason you would create such a version or such a type of business process is, let's say the most common use case that companies use is if they want to hire executives, which usually becomes like a confidential hire. Companies are very, very particular about sharing information of if an executive is leaving the organization and who will be taking their place or who will be next. So until and unless they don't have someone in place, they usually don't announce it. So for that reason, you can create another hire process only for executives. In that case, your default definition, you'll make a copy and only for the executive supervisory organization, where you're at the level your executives are higher. So you can have a different hiring process and which routes to different people for approval, not to your regular recruiters, but to someone, at a much higher position who should have visibility into the recruiting process of executives. Someone like a recruiting administrator should be involved in such process instead of your regular recruiters. So that is one good use case you would use this. Another one is for matrix organization, which is a part of advanced HCM, but I'll still give you a high-level understanding of it. So matrix organizations are created for special projects. So you have a project came in and you are the leader or you're the manager of that particular initiative, but you also manage your own team. So in this case, you need a special team, a very specific, very niche skill set, and you will have the ability to have your own organization, which will have people from different areas of the company come together, work on the project, and once it's done, the organization will be dissolved. So that is also a possibility, and you can do it through matrix organization. And in cases like that, again, you can create a different hiring process for that particular type of organization. So these are the two primary use cases, but again, a lot of companies still go with default definition because it's much cleaner, reporting is much better. Now, the third type is rule-based, which gives you more flexibility than the object-based. So critical is nothing but again like a condition rule. where you have to follow A equals to B, which you are familiar with through the compensation topic. Those eligibility rules were only specific to your compensation. These condition rules you can use anywhere except for compensation. Okay, now, how does this work? I'll again go back to my hire process. I click on the related actions, business process, copy or link business process definition, follow the same steps. This time we'll use this rule-based workflow. In this, we can give the name. Let's say we'll give it Velvet rule-based. Click OK. And this also, I'll remove the existing steps. We'll add that steps later and click OK. In rule-based, you have to do one additional step, one or two additional steps. It is not as straightforward as your object-based. Now, once this is saved, I'll do that additional step. Until now, the process is same. Instead of object-based, you have to select the rule-based. Now, you can see here, it says hire Velvet rule-based. Instead of default definition, it gives you the name, what you added in that particular input field. And it also marks rule-based definition, yes. This means that this is a rule-based definition. Now, still we have not made it exclusive to a rule. It is still a generic business process. So what we do is we go to the related actions button again to the business process, and we use the option which is called rule-based business process configuration. We select on that, and then we add our rule. Let's say we want this only for full-time employees for Global Modern Inc. So that are two different conditions. So since we don't have that created, we'll create it. Click it here. We'll get an option to create condition rule. If the rule already exists, you can use that. But if it does not exist, we'll create it. So organization superior. This is your value of A. I'm gonna equalize it with the value of B, which we used earlier, global. So I pick something else. And in this case, you can select a supervisory organization, either a location hierarchy, it could be anything. It does not necessarily have to be a supervisory. You can see this is a type company, and I can select this also. So that's not at all a problem. So more flexibility in your hands. So I'll just go with this for now. And you can select multiple also. In business object, you could only select one. And then I can add another rule here, another row item, which tells me that the employee type, basically it's either an employee or a worker. See whether you want an intern, you want a regular, either of these is okay. So anytime a new hire comes in and this rule is applied, we can use our newly created business process. And the way this will work is anytime a new hire enters the company and is hired in this Global Modern Services and is a full-time or intern, they'll go through this version of the process based on this rule. That's why the name rule-based configuration. And let's say you're working on it, that page is gone, you can very easily search, just type in BP colon and write down the name, Velvet rule. You can see business process definition. So BP colon is the short keyword of that. And this is how it looks like. Now your setup is complete. And rule-based are more commonly used when you have to create custom versions. So these two types, object-based and rule-based, are nothing but custom type of business process. This is Workday delivered, and these are the custom ones. These are not Workday delivered. These are what we create on our own. So the best example of this rule-based is your onboarding business process. And that is what we'll design ourselves and we'll create also. Why onboarding is because every country, or I'll say every region, I won't be very country specific, let's be region specific. Like Americas, Latam, Asia Pacific, Europe. Every region has specific requirements for onboarding, how they prefer to onboard new hires. So we generally create, yeah, and onboarding is a lengthy process because on day one, employee has to fill in a lot of information like personal data, government IDs, payroll information, banking information, all that stuff. So we cannot be having one business process for all countries. So we make it specific to that region. And within that, we can create different condition rules to work with it. So onboarding is one such good example. Another one is time off. Time off is also a good example of creating rule-based, because every country has their own policy. So I'm not saying that we create a rule base for every country. We go by the region, and we can also restrict it by adding more conditions to it. For rule-based, onboarding is one of the best examples. And again, let's say if you have 100 processes your company is using, out of that, maybe 5 or 10 processes would be like where you will use the custom version. 90% of your business processes, you will continue to use the default definition, modify it as per your requirements. But the next best setup that you can use is rule-based. So I'll put that in the order. And I can write those examples here. Onboarding is one such example, which is onboarding, then time off. Then sometimes one-time payment is also another business process, which you can use rule-based because, see, why do we create a rule-based? All right, let's take an example of onboarding. People are hiring in your organization. If your company is only, let's say, in Boston only, then you don't need custom versions. You need custom types only when your existing business process is becoming too lengthy, and every time you have to add something into the process, there's a lot of work to do. So what you do is you create another copy of it and make it specific to some requirements. And those requirements are nothing but what your rule would be. So let's say you have a default onboarding definition and it's working as expected. But now that your company has expanded to the European region and they don't need banking information, but what they need is they need their government IDs, they need their driver license, which is not at all required in the US, let's say, just for an example. So what you do is instead of adding more rows into the existing definition, you create a custom rule using the rule based that any employee hired in EMEA, which is your European region, you can add another row of condition logic to it. And anytime a new hire comes in, they'll go through that process of onboarding instead of the one that is defined for other regions. Same for time off, same for one-time payment. So rule-based comes more handy, it gives you more flexibility. Versus if we talk about object-based, the only restriction it can use is through supervisory, which is really not a very, it does not give you freedom to do a lot of things. Only and only if you have very, very specific use case, like I showed earlier, hiring for executives, you can use that. But tool-based is the second best option if you want to go with custom. So there are pros and cons of this as well. The pros that you have is troubleshooting times reduces to bare minimum because you're only troubleshooting where it is failing. Let's say in the default definition of onboarding, we had this scenario where we had about more than 120 steps in one business process, which is actually a lot. Even 20 steps are a lot. So being a global organization, that is why we have 120 steps. Now we are moving to a setup where we'll customize it based on the rule. And I'm actually leading that project for quite a while. So we will be going separately by regions. And within that, we will have different condition rules. So what we are doing is we are dividing our 100 steps into 5 different processes. So that way, if something is failing in the Asia Pacific region. I'll only work with the Asia Pacific business process. And the best part of it is it won't have impact on any other process. But in traditional way, if I have to add one step, I'll have to test all the other 119 steps to make sure adding that one step is not failing the other 119 steps. So that's a big benefit of using rule-based. But on the other hand, the con of it is if there is any Workday update that they might have changed any field or something like that, you will have to update it in all your custom versions. And that's a manual effort. But I still see that not, like overpowering the benefit of rule-based. I still see that, okay, we can do that. That's not a problem because the benefit of using rule-based is far better than the cons of it. Now you can see here, there's an if section in here. This if takes care of your entry conditions like the one that you have. So this particular step C, which says change veteran status identification, will only trigger if this condition rule is true. Now, this condition rule is not the one that we are using in the rule base. This is specific to this business process, which says if the employee is in the US or any of the US location, then only this will trigger. Same will happen for I-9. There are these entry conditions. Like that's how we were able to do it till 120 steps because of these entry conditions, right? So let's say employee is not in US and you still have more. You see, these are more condition rules, which says that if the management level is greater than manager and location is Pune and proposed location hierarchy is not UK. So if these two are true, then only this will execute. If these are not true, then Workday will bypass this and move to the next one, so on and so forth. Now, what does that mean for others? Let's say for this, there is no rule. This means for every new hire, you will have this. Because definitely in every company, every new hire, irrespective of which country you are hiring, there are some basic onboarding information that every employee has to do, including their government IDs, emergency contacts, government ID that they have added it again. So there are some which is common for all, but then there are some which is specific. And that specific is not like too different. It's maybe a couple different, maybe 4 or 5 different specific steps that are there in onboarding. So that can be catered through entry conditions. But if you are going a lot more specific, then only you should go with rule-based. And that too, you should not go till a number of 40, 50 for each and every country. Then again, that is not a scalable solution. Because in that case, you'll end up spending more time in maintenance than doing the actual work. The only purpose of this class was to give you understanding to kickstart your hands-on by creating custom versions. So create a rule-based and create an object-based. That's all you have to do in the assignment for today. And once you do that, you will see a lot of other things. You will get intrigued by them, and the next session will be more productive.